Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little exercise here to give you an example of how to basically create the commands to build a command to create a table. All right. So what I have here is actually let's go back over here. Here lab exercise one. And what we talk about here, each one of these tables, first couple, as we said, have a sample script, all right, which we can use to create the table. All right. So let's take the address table right here. So I've copied it over to another document, so we can take a look at it. All right. So a couple things. The way there's a command in SQL, there's a particular structure, and there's what they call reserved words that you use when executing a command. All right. So what I want to do is kind of walk you the structure of how this particular, what we call the create table command is structured in SQL. And once you take a look at it, then if you can do this one, then we can do basically you can build almost any table. All right. So so for starters, the format of this is start off with this create table. So the create table is a reserve. These are reserve words. These are commands that you would use. So we say create table, and then we have what the table name is. All right, so let's do something here just for maybe to simplify this just a little bit. I'm going to take this out. No, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to take some of the stuff out to simplify the structure. Give it a little bit of a better picture. All right. So what I have is I'm going to park this data down here just for the out of the way. All right. So this is actually a legitimate command. So this right here, this create table address with the address ID and the primary key. The way you would read this is, if I'm going to create a table, I have one field in the table, right, one column, right, which is this address ID, which is, well, if you take a look at this, we have this auto increment here. So this is going to be our key. All right, so what will happen is every time we generate a row in the table, it will assign the next number. All right, and then what we do is we define the primary key for this table to be this field. All right, and this is the format. And as you can see, we start off with the create table. These are reserved words here. The description of the table of the address ID field. So it's the address ID. This small int, that's a reserved word. Unsigned is a reserved word. Not null are reserved words. Auto increment are reserved words. And primary key is a reserved word. So all of these words have meaning inside of SQL, right, in the definition of SQL. All right. But what I've done is I've taken these other fields out just to kind of simplify the structure. All right. So this right here is a legitimate command. It starts off with the create table, define one field, make that field the primary key, and then at the end, you put a semicolon. All right. So if I execute this, I'm going to create a table with one field in it, and I'm going to make that field the key. All right. So, and then what I can do is I can put all the, I can, no, let's re-add everything back in. Okay, so I'm going to add this back into our command structure here. Clean that up. All right, so all this is, so what you need is, to create a table, the create table command. All right, you define the name of the table. Um, you need at least one field, but after you define what the table name is, you define the field. So you need at least one field to put the key. All right, so this address ID, we're going to make this the key. And then and when what you do is you just assign all these other fields just as simply, and the format is, it's the name of the field, some description of the type of data that's in the field, and the length. So as we say here, this is var car 50. What that means, it's characters. The car is characters, variable characters, 50 characters long. And the word's not null. When not null means it is a mandatory field. All right. If you don't put not null as a characteristic on a field, what that means is you don't have to enter a character. You don't have to enter a data into the field. The field can be null. All right. And null is not the same thing as blank. So just as a concept to think about. Null means there's no value in it. All right. A blank is a field 40. All right. So it's actually a character. A blank is a character. All right. So what we're interested in is things that are not null. If it's not null, it means okay. The expectation is there's going to be a value we're going to assign. All right. So this is basically the structure of the table. So let's take a look. Let's grab another one of these out of our library. Let's take one of the ones we don't have a structure for. All right, so let's take let me take the inventory table. All right, so the inventory table, if we read the inventory table, look at our description. Has a couple fields. So we have the inventory ID, right, which is going to be our generated key, as we saw before. Inventory description, an available item count, right, a store ID, and then the last update. All right. So let's take this. We'll take this data here, and let's copy this over to our document. And kind of work with it a little bit. Control C. All right. So the table is going to be called. So this is going to be called the inventory table. So go to our document here, and we'll create take our data elements here, Control V. And what I'll do is I'm actually going to I'll take all these other fields out for now. So what we're going to keep is the key and the key definition. All right. So we'll say we're going to create a table called inventory. All right. And this will become an inventory ID, which will become the key. All right, so this is where we define the field. And this is where we're going to make it the key, the primary key. All right. So now we have that, what I want to do is let's take our data here. So these are the field names. So we've already added the inventory ID, so we don't need that. Take this out. So we have an item description, an available item count, a store ID, and the last update. All right. So what we'll do is I'm going to take this and I'm just going to kind of plop these into place. I'll just cut and paste this in. And we'll just put the field names in here. All right, so I've got that. All right, so what we do is, I've created the field names here. All right, so what we're going to need to do is we kind of assign the values for these. All right, so we've got an item description. All right, we're going to say it's a character. We'll say it's a character, 50 character field. So basically it's going to be a VAR we'll make it 50, so it's 50. And we'll make this not null, which means, okay, if you're going to be working with this, so basically if you're, whenever we enter a record, we want to make sure that we've got a description associated with it. All right, and I think that's the only thing we're going to want for the description. And we'll end this with a comma, because actually you can read this as all one. You can read these all as one long string, but what we're doing is we're going to put one field on each line and then separate it with a comma. All right, and we can go back and look at some of these other examples out here, the ones we already had created. All right, so we can say small int unsigned would be like a numeric and last update. So let's go back over and look at some of the other data types. So I've got the item available count. So that's going to be a numeric field. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a small int. And I'll also make this not null. If you'll note though, I didn't say unsigned here, all right, because basically we're going to, the count could be negative. All right, so you want to make sure we have a sign on this. So if you don't, by default, you're putting a sign on it. All right, so we have that. So let's take a look at a store ID. So inventory. Which will be the last one here. So the store ID. All right, and we take a look at how what this is described as. A surrogate primary key uniquely identifies a store. All right. So what that means is the characteristics of this is going to be, this is the foreign, this is going to be the key. So that's going to look like, well, will actually look like a small int. All right, so what we'll do is we'll make it a small int 5. We'll make this also a small int. We're not going to make it auto increment because the auto increment is only going to be for um, the primary key, so the inventory ID, but we'll make it look like a kind of the same characteristic of the key, and we enter with a comma. Then we have a last update field. So let's look at the example of the data we're using for that, for the last update field. So in this case, we can cut and paste this right here. So this is the last update field. It's a timestamp, not null, current, default, current update, timestamp on update, current timestamp. Basically, what that means is every time we update the record, so we create the record, we update the record, what will happen is it'll take the current timestamp, whatever's happening, our time is right now, um, minutes, seconds, and insert it into the field. All right, so what we'll do is we'll just borrow this this definition here. All right, and we'll come back over here. Okay, so what we have here is now the inventory table, a definition of the, this is what we've, so we've have taken that description, kind of have used some of the pieces, of these commands to kind of create a template that we can use. So that, what you would do is for any of these tables, you would take basically the create table commands, define the key field, assign the key field to be the primary key, all right, and then you just go through and add the numbers or add the other fields as we go. All right, so that's really going to be the exercise. Um, that's the exercise we're to finish up the remaining pieces of Lab 1. All right.